You're listening to the Run for Your Lives podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Daphne.
And I'm Pake.
And this is the Run for Your Lives podcast.
This episode is the adventure thriller Jaws, directed by Steven Spielberg, released on June 20th, 1975. And this is a very special episode this week because we brought on an awesome guest, a good friend of mine, and co-host over on Strange Indeed while we're covering Bly Manor and stuff right now. I've mentioned her name a few times on here. Please welcome to the show here, Rima.
Welcome, Rima.
Hey guys. Thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to be talking about this movie with you guys.
Yes, I'm happy to have you here because I think Jaws, honestly, one of the first things I think is Rima. So
Absolutely. We couldn't think about podcasting about this movie without you being part of it.
Thanks. I love that. Anyone that knows me knows that this is one of my favorites. I talk about it a lot. I reference it a lot. I quote it all the time. So it's definitely been one of my longtime favorite movies and probably my number one movie since I was a kid. And all these many, many, many years later, still my favorite. Holds up.
I think it does. I really think that it does. I have to agree.
Awesome. So let's dive in. Pun not intended, as it's mostly on the water.
Come on, you know you meant to do that. You know you meant to do that.
It'll be great.
So we are diving in, and we are going to take a look at some of the behind-the-scenes things, like we usually do. Jaws is actually the fourth film that was directed by Steven Spielberg. It was filmed on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, and was the first feature motion picture to be shot on the ocean. Principal photography was supposed to take 55 days, but it took 159 days to complete. The film is based on the book Jaws by Peter Benchley. It was nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Picture. It did not win Best Picture. That went to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But it did win 3 for editing, sound, and the original score by the amazing John Williams.
Mm-hmm.
The shark has been nicknamed by fans and by some of those that were involved with the movie. They have been calling him Bruce. And it was actually after Steven Spielberg's lawyer, Bruce Raymer, in 2001, was selected by the Library of Congress for preservation in the U.S. National Film Registry as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. The original budget was $4 million, but the effects cost due to malfunctioning mechanical sharks ballooned to $3 million, and so overall the budget was $9 million, and it grossed $472 million, the highest grossing film of 1975. It is 124 minutes, and the tagline is, "Don't go in the water."
Mm-hmm.
So, Pake, why don't you give us a synopsis of Jaws?
All right, our quick little synopsis of this one here is, when a killer shark unleashes chaos on a beach community, it's up to a local sheriff, a marine biologist, and an old seafarer to hunt the beast down. Sums it up all right?
I think that explains it really well.
I like the quick, succinct, and not super spoilery, detail-oriented ones, just like again, I'm not going to be doing this on purpose, but there's just a lot of fishing and sea puns that are going to happen because that's just where my brain is. But yeah, so these quick things that are what's going to hook you in and reel you into watching this movie, right?
Already we're starting. Already.
It's from watching Owen so much in Bly Manor with all of his puns. It's rubbing off on Pake.
I think so.
Oh, man. All right. Well, I think it's about time to kind of get into the discussion about this movie. And again, usually me and Daphne just kind of bounce topics back and forth and have a discussion. But when we have a guest, we want to make sure everything runs a little smoothly. So we do have a top 3 format. And so we will go count those down, our 3, 2, 1 for each of us. And I think we will start with our guest, our esteemed guest, Rima, tonight, and let her kick off with her number 3.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, thanks, guys. I'm honored, seriously, to be here and talk about this movie because I feel like I just don't talk about it enough, although people that know me would disagree. So I'm going to start off with my number 3. And I want to talk a little bit about one of my favorite aspects of this film, which is the cinematography.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think so much of whether it was on purpose or by necessity, I love the cinematography. So we know a lot of things happened because there were so many issues filming that some things they had to do because of necessity. So, there were things they did on purpose and other things maybe not so much on purpose. One of the first things I do love is, the opener that we have, with Chrissy as she's swimming, very much there in the beginning. And, the view that you get when she's just waiting in the water and you have this view, like this shark's view from above. Of course, you're not quite sure what it is just yet. We're still, if you've never seen Jaws before, you get this view of her from above, instantly spooky, and something that, I've always had this fear of even before I ever saw the movie Jaws. Just as a kid, when I used to go swimming I never swim in the ocean. I'm very much landlocked. But we used to go boating on the weekends and swim in the river. And that's something that I always kind of thought of was like, what if there's something underneath me? I can't see, what is there something down there looking up at me? So that scene to me was very relatable. So I thought a very beautifully shot kind of moment there. Another shot that always really kind of stuck with me, and it's pretty famous there in Jaws, is the scene at the beach with Brody. This is after the shark attack has happened, and they're all trying to kind of minimize it. And he's still very unsettled with the whole incident. He doesn't feel good about, the whole thing between the mayor and the medical examiner and everyone. He's feeling, something is off here and he's not feeling good about, but he's under all this pressure. And so he's super tense. He's at the beach. And everyone is, you see all the different people swimming in the beach. You've got the dog, playing in the water with his owner. You've got the little kids splashing, around. You've got this one lady off kind of just floating by herself. And, there's this shot where, and I cannot remember the character's name after all these years. I do not know this character's name. I just know his wife, who's got the dark hair and the glasses. I don't even know her name that well. And this is shocking to me because I watch it all the time. But he comes over and you see, as he's talking to Brody, he's in the shot, but Brody is paying attention to what's happening in the water. And I love that so much because it's called, they use, what is this called? Sorry. It's a split diopter. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that absolutely correctly, but it's a type of, effect that allows to convey multiple pieces of information in a single shot. And that's what they do here. And, I love movies and I love learning about movies, and I'm kind of a bit of a nerd when it comes to movies and learning how they do these things. So I think that this conveys, the tension, and that's what I love so much about, how they shot all of these things, is because they have this way without a lot of words, and without Brody even saying anything, he's not paying any attention to this guy. He's paying attention to what's happening out there.
Yep.
And there's a lot of that out there in this film as to how they do that. And then of course the whole tension of when he chooses to, again, out of necessity, not show the shark for a while, which is very effective. They wanted to show it early. They didn't. I'm sure we're going to talk about this later. I'm sure it's some, a point somewhere else, but just very effective in how they're able to, without a whole lot of dialogue, get these tense moments on the screen and make you feel something. And I love that so much in movie making. So that's my number 3.
Yeah. Specifically that scene that you mentioned. There's a lot of tension in that because you're like, it's like, okay, I know what movie I'm getting into, even if it's something you hadn't seen before. You're like, I know what I'm getting into. And there's so many of these moving pieces. You're like, oh, there's this lady here and there's this dog here. All these things you talk about. Like, what's it going to be? Who's it going to be? And you kind of have that same feeling as Brody's watching back and forth. And I do love, kind of add on that, how they would play with it. They trick you a little bit. There's the figure swimming up on the lady, and then it's just some other like diver or like swimmer.
Bad Hat Harry.
Yeah.
Bad Hat Harry.
And then you get the younger girl like screaming, and Brody kind of tenses up and he's ready, and then it's just like her boyfriend picking her up from underneath, and so everything's on edge, and then it kind of like takes off pretty quickly from there with the dog is just gone. And
Nobody talks about Pipit the dog.
I know.
It's always about Alex Kittner, which, yes, deserves some recognition. We always celebrate Alex Kittner Day every year, but nobody talks about Pipit the dog.
Yeah.
Who went missing. Yeah.
I know, and that, after he went missing, to me, that was the first part of, okay,
Yeah.
shit just got real. We're going to see something. And then all of a sudden you see the blood and that bright yellow
Yeah.
floaty flip over, and the blood is flying, but you don't see a shark.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't even see a fin. Yeah.
You don't see anything.
I read an interview with the man now who who played the role of Alex Kittner. They interviewed him, some Australian article. They had interviewed him a couple of years ago, talking about because people still recognize him even as a full-grown adult now. People still know who he is. He like works at a bar, and people will like call him up or text him like, "Oh, you just died on TV again," or they'll do. But yeah, he was asking about that. He was an extra. Him and some of his other like friends when they were kids just lived on the island in the area where they were filming, and all showed up to just try to be in the movie as extras. And for some reason, they took a liking to him and decided to give him that part. So he's not even like a casted.
Wow.
Like he hasn't done other movies since then. And so he was kind of talking about doing all of that. And they, it took like 4 or 5 different tries, and they'd have to clean the water up from all the like blood and then redo it. They had like divers that would like pull him down and like give him oxygen while they're holding him underwater. And it was this whole thing. I was like, that's really cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's cool. It's really cool how they did that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But cool. Is there anything else on that? Or you said that's kind of covered there?
That's just as a whole, without going into every scene in the film, which I feel like from beginning to end was just beautifully shot, beautifully edited. They did an amazing job putting this together and making something that I feel like everyone in Spielberg, especially, who wouldn't even talk about the film for years, like he's like, just don't even talk to me about Jaws. Don't ask me about Jaws. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to remember it. He has finally come out and talked about it in recent years, but for a very long time didn't even want to talk about it. I was like, I love this film. Whatever you guys did was just like movie magic to me, and has been, since, like I said, since I was a kid.
Yeah, kind of a cursed film that ended up working out anyway perfectly.
Yeah.
I know. And it cracks me up how they, talk about all the disasters and everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and whether it was the actors or, the shark, or just filming at sea, because, you're dealing with the ocean and Mother Nature and salt water and just so many things. If it was going to go wrong, it did. And it somehow still came out to be this amazing film that I still treasure and love to this day.
Saltwater is definitely a different experience. Having grown up on an island myself, it definitely, and I'll get to this in my number 2, I have a little story to tell about my dad that relates to Brody and his dislike of the water.
Oh, awesome.
Because
can't wait to hear that.
I have a little story.
Ooh, little teaser. I love
it.
Little teaser.
Right.
Little teaser of a little story. A little Daphne backstory, a little bit.
Love it.
All right. Well, let's get a little step closer to that then, I guess. And let's go ahead and hit up your number 3 first.
My number 3 has to be the madness that is the character of Quint.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Quint, I had a hard time picking a top 3 for this movie because it easily could have been like a top 15.
Yes.
Because of all the different things. So with this one, it was kind of easy because he was such a complex character and I feel just a little bit crazy. And I think it's warranted because of his experiences.
Yeah.
And when we first meet him, he's running his fingers down a chalkboard making that terrible noise that no one ever wants to hear. It makes your teeth hurt.
Yes.
When you hear that. And talks about how he'll go kill the shark find him and kill him for $10,000, not the $3,000 that Alex Kittner's mother is offering up, I believe. And of course she advertised in all the newspapers, and every person with a boat or without a boat is coming to cram into skiffs. Basically, that's what they're called, skiffs, to go out and try to catch this shark. No way. Not happening. So, and then his man cave, it's not really a man cave, it's kind of his house or his fishery where he's got all of these jawbones of sharks everywhere. And then he's also brewing moonshine over on the side.
Yeah.
Which, that was kind of funny that he... Who gives the police chief a shot glass of home brewed moonshine, totally illegal? Be like, I made this myself. Here you go. Try that.
Have a little bit of the homemade mash.
Of course.
Happens around these parts, I'll tell you that. But, I don't know about up north.
Yeah, not so much here. I do have friends that are in the craft beer realm where they're trying to make their own beer. But not anything like this. Not at all. It was also interesting when he was they were having this little jockeying for who had the worst cuts and bruises and bites and scratches and bangs between him and Hooper.
Yeah.
Brody doesn't really get in on it, but you could tell he was kind of looking at his stomach because I believe he got shot there. At least that's what I thought.
Oh, I was wondering if it was an appendix scar, maybe he had his appendix taken out. He's looking for oh well, I kind of got a permanent scar from my appendix.
That's what I was thinking. Is maybe an appendectomy scar or something.
It could be.
Yeah.
I tried to research it and I couldn't really find any information. But he was a cop in New York before he went to Amity Island. So I wondered, well, they must have left because it was too, intense for them to raise their kids there. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, there's a little throwaway line he mentions where he was just I got tired of New York with all the muggings and all of this and all of that. And he was just it's quiet here.
It's definitely quiet.
Right. But on Amity, one man can make a difference.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
New York, it's a little bit harder to make a difference.
Yeah.
Probably New York in the 70s, too.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was definitely a different time, different place for New York. New York in the 70s and 80s is not going to New York today. It was, definitely a different environment. And, so I can imagine, and probably not the best place, as he said, to, raise a family. He's got two little kids.
Yeah, so I kind of thought maybe he did get shot and he was going to show where he got shot, but then they were pulling up their pant legs, showing this bite and this brush against a shark, and then finally they started singing, and then he starts to tell a story.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then it all made sense to me why Quint is just a little bit off. And it has to do with being on the USS Indianapolis and the ship sinking and 1,100 people in the water and only 360 came out. And he talks about finding his friend that had been bitten in half and all of that.
Yeah.
It all just started to make sense to me. It's okay, I get you, Quint. Totally get you now, why you're the way you are. And he didn't seem scared about going to hunt for the shark at all.
Mm-mm.
But I found it funny that he ended up with Brody, who hates the water, and Hooper, who's the smartest person there, but who they just didn't, I didn't feel like they hit it off really well from the beginning, so...
It was that moment that you mentioned where they're comparing scars and talking. That's when they finally kind of connected and clicked, as they got through their little scuffle or with each other, this mental block where they just did not get along with each other. And it was once they were able to lay that down and kind of lay down the barriers where they're just oh yeah, I've been through this and I've been through that. And I loved when Hooper, I think it was one of his things where he's showing his chest and there's no scar there. There's nothing there. What are you? And he's and I forget the girl's name that he mentioned.
Marilyn Moffat.
Yeah. He's she broke my heart. And then they all just laughed. And it was a good moment. It was quickly transitioned into fear, but but that's what it took to really, I think, get them together as a like coherent team.
Yeah, and he still bossed them around the boat a lot.
Well, he's still the captain.
Yeah.
He is the captain. No, Hooper, you drive the boat. No, Brody, you stay down there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was in charge of that boat.
Yeah.
And, well, it was his boat. So, I mean, of course, that's what you get. That's what you get when you're on someone's boat. Yeah. They'll tell you what to do. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you more about that in a bit. He ruined the radio. I was just like, why are you breaking this up? And it's because he doesn't want anyone to know where they are at all.
Yeah, he has almost like this, instead of being afraid after everything that he went through, it's like a personal vendetta where he's just like, this is my fight and I have to make up for it in some way, or I have to.
Yeah.
He's very, very dead set on like, this is my fight and this is what I have to do. I have to go out here and face this and take care of this shark.
Yeah.
He wasn't thinking, though, about the other people that were on the boat at all. Mm-hmm. Poor Brody just wanted to go home.
Yeah. He's just like, let's just get a bigger boat and let's come back to this or get some help with this. And Quint was not having any of it. And I think a lot of that had, I don't think Quint was looking to necessarily prove to anyone else, but I think he was kind of talking or elaborating a little bit on what you were saying there, Pake. I think he had something to prove to himself. Like he saw this as his white whale, right? Or his, this was his whale that he was going after. And this was going to be like all the stories that he tells. And when he's talking about all the stories of, he hooked this one and he hooked that one, and you see all the trophies in his, I'm going to call it his house. I know it's not his house, but I'm guessing he probably does live there, but his boathouse, I'm going to call it, I guess, that he lives there on the water. And you see all the trophies. This is going to be his big whale. He's like Ahab, out there going after the whale. And he's doing that himself. He didn't initially even want anyone with him, but because of the circumstances of the, agreement, he had to let them come along, but he was not going to allow anyone to help him. He was a very stubborn, proud man for sure. And I think that's what kind of led to that.
He definitely was very stubborn. He got a little crazy too at one point, because when he thought they were going to bring the shark in, he was laughing in this like hysterical laugh about the taxidermy man having a heart attack when he sees what he brought him. And I'm just like, you are taking steps over, okay? I get you. Keep going, and then pushing the boat to the point where he wanted to go to the shallows so they could drown him, but he was pushing the engine so hard that, he knew it was going to blow up.
Yeah.
I don't know that he thought he was going to end up being lunch, but that's what happened.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing that I did kind of notice or like question. I'm like, this guy's a very, very seasoned captain. I don't know why he would push the boat past that limit, other than maybe just that personal vendetta or whatever had taken over past a point where he didn't care anymore. And it was...
Yeah, I think he just wanted to face the shark.
Mm-hmm.
And it really wasn't about anyone else on the boat. It was about what he needed to do, what he had for his plan.
Yeah.
And that was to take care of this shark. I don't know if he thought it was going to avenge all the people that died, his friends or other crew members. He ended up paying the ultimate price in the end. And I was able to find out that Quint was actually based on a real person.
Cool.
Yeah, the late Frank Mundus. And I guess he actually did say the line, "You all know me, you all know what I do." Which is, of course, is what Quint says when he's talking to everyone about going after the shark for $10,000.
Yeah. Cool.
And so, that's my number 3.
Awesome.
Nice.
It's a good one. All right. My number 3 is, I have it here as Bruce, because yes, as you mentioned in the behind the scenes, that's the nickname that this shark was given on set and by crew and fans alike after. But I just kind of have Bruce and his kill. So not necessarily like the mechanical Bruce, but within the movie universe, like this shark itself and kind of what we see it go throughout the movie. I just kind of wanted to, run through it. Even from the very first, at the very opening, Rima was talking about a little bit, which, this girl and this total dweeb. I mean, yeah, he was pretty drunk, but still, I was like, what a loser. He's stumbling, chasing, just yells out, I'm not drunk. It's like, oh, sure. And then he passes out on the beach while she's getting slaughtered, and he just doesn't know anything. But, so that's, we get to see pretty right off the bat. Like, we don't see the shark, we don't see a lot of gore, because it's all, like, at dark, in the dark, and everything's kind of hidden, even though you do get to see her kind of getting slung around and pulled off the buoy and all these things. It's a good intro, like, good opener, good intro. And then Rima talked about the next big scene there at the beach where you're kind of wondering what's going to happen. Luckily, the dog, we don't see anything happen. Because I've even while watching thinking, like, I know how Rima is with animals. I was like, how could this be her favorite? And I was like, oh yeah, we don't actually see anything. So it's less horrifying with the dog.
You know what happens, but I didn't have to see it. It's terrible when you I struggle when they're showing an animal death. It's pretty much the worst thing for me. So.
Even more than this like little boy, but
no, I'm good with Alex Kittner being completely slaughtered and his blood completely soaking saturating the ocean, but not Pippet. I couldn't have taken Pippet would have drove me over the edge.
Yeah, no. Rima, I'm the same way. I will turn off a movie if that happens. Man. I don't want to see it.
But yeah, speaking of the Alex Kittner, I was, I'm thinking, going back and looking at it, I was like, that is a lot of gore. Like, I'm surprised, even in, like, especially in the 70s, how does this movie only have a PG rating?
That was the 70s and 80s though. I grew up mostly in the 80s because I was, without giving my age away too much, but I grew up primarily in the 80s and the 80s movies, and there was, I feel like a longer or just a bigger threshold, I think, for the gore and violence that you were allowed to show. For
like full PG. On severed body parts.
It was not a big deal in those days. It wasn't until later they started to kind of, and then then later. I mean, there was no PG-13. It was either PG or it was R. Yeah. It was, I think later. I think it was because of Steven Spielberg is that there's a PG-13 rating now. But that's
because this would have been. If that was a thing.
If this was a thing, that would have been it. But I think there was just a bigger threshold. So to me, that was nothing. I was used to a lot of, at least growing up at that time.
Yeah, because I was just like, that's a lot of, like, a fountain of blood. That's just
like literally like spewing upwards.
It's like, man.
Blood fountain.
And then we get some other, fun moments with the shark. We see his kind of attack on the two fishermen who are trying to catch him with this holiday roast, which luckily both of them managed to get away and escape, but it's still a really cool scene.
It is.
Where the shark like pulls the dock in half on this chain, which really is like the first step that we see, like, oh, this is a much bigger threat than we've even been led to believe. Like, it's capable of a lot, to where now when they go out on the boat later, you're like, oh, they're actually against something a lot more than just reeling in a shark. And it was a cool visual of, the dock being pulled, and then you see the dock turn and start heading back towards the guy who's swimming away. That's that tension. And again, without seeing the shark at all, but just using things that are attached to it and floating as the visual effect and the music. And it gets really tense, and I love that. And then we get the first time we actually see Bruce, which is he's attacking the guy, the boater who's out there with Michael and his friends. And also quite brutal. Another blood fountain, a full-on like severed leg that looked highly realistic floating down to the bottom.
Real. Yep.
Yeah, and then, we get Michael being traumatized or in shock. And some people are kind of confused about how that happened. And it's one of those things where they ended up, and there's like extended versions of the movie that show this better. But in just kind of the normal theatrical cut, it's hard to pick up. But actually, they did film stuff they ended up kind of taking out because it seemed to be too harsh for some viewers. Where the guy who was killed is actually like grabbing Michael and like pushing him out of the way and basically steps between or swims between the shark and Michael And so Michael sits there and watches this guy who just saved his life then just get ripped apart right in front of him.
Oh,
so
wow.
it's a little more, it's a little more traumatic than what we see in like the normal versions of the film.
Well, and I think what you see in the film is pretty traumatic, or at least for a child of Michael's age. You know, I know he tries to act all mature in the film, but he is still just a little kid. And he literally just watched within just a few feet of him, you know, get taken apart by this shark, and in a very violent manner. The man is screaming for his life, and it was very violent, lots of blood. And the shark, you know, doesn't attack Michael, but it swims right next to him. I believe it kind of grazes him. And shark skin is kind of rough, kind of like sandpaper. So if they brush up against you, you might get like a little bit of an abrasion, you know, just from, you know, coming in contact. And I think that just seeing what he saw and then having the shark literally just be like, I'm just going to like let you know I'm here, you know, and just kind of graze him. I mean, I'd probably pass out and drown if that were me. So Michael still being like, you know, being able to maintain, you know, wading water and being rescued was something I'd be in shock too, to say the least. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I understand the confusion there where people might not understand what was happening.
And then we go on with like the whole like back half of this movie is them just out on the water having different encounters with the shark, which I kind of have that as like a separate note, is like all these different encounters and everything that happens with that. But I'll skip over that for now, but I'm sure we'll circle back around again like this shark tends to do. I'm not even doing this on purpose, I promise.
You are.
But we kind of get, jumping over that, we kind of get to the main ending of Bruce. I'm going to just jump to that. Of course, we talked about Quint quite a bit earlier, but his kind of unceremonious demise in a way where he just kind of goes down, you know, he falls into the mouth and he's like, okay, I'm gone. I mean, he got some good stabs in with that machete, and that was pretty brutal. Just kind of bit, not quite in half, but kind of, and then just pulled into the water like, bye. That's it. That's the end of Quint. And then I love the way that the shark is finally defeated and killed, because it's foreshadowed pretty earlier in the movie, kind of halfway, when they're first setting out and they're getting on the water in the boat. And, you know, Hooper's warning about these, you know, compressed air canisters, saying like, oh, they, you know, you got to be real careful with them. They'll blow up. And then Quint just says, oh, the shark will probably just eat it. We got a little bit of both of that. So that was cool.
Certainly did.
So I think that covers most of what I want to talk about, is just as far as some of the biggest Bruce scenes and moments we got of the shark.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Rima, what is your number 2?
My number 2, I want to talk a little bit about funny moments, and I feel like you guys probably have some good lines and stuff too, so I'm hoping this is a collaborative effort. I know that I don't have everything here, or maybe you guys consider something funny and maybe I didn't quite see it that way, but there's so many in this film that I just love how you get a little mixture of, you know, maybe it's not meant to be funny, but they're just, to me, funny. When one that I really love and gets me every time. And, you know, I've seen this movie so many times. Like I said, from the time I was a kid to now, I've seen it just probably hundreds and hundreds of times. And every time I watch it, still feels new to me. And so I see these funny moments and they still make me laugh like they did the first time when I saw it. And one of them is when Brody yells at Michael to get out of his new boat. You know, he's been reading, like he's just immersed in shark information. Yeah. And he's, you know, freaked out about this shark and, you know, doesn't know how to deal with it. And he's reading all of these books and he's really high intense, and learns that Michael is sitting out there in his boat out in the water, and he yells at him to get out of the boat. And Ellen is like, you know, hey, he's not in the water. He's in a boat. He'll probably never go out into the water again after what happened yesterday, after Alex Kittner had died. And so he's like, oh, don't say that. And they're just kind of talking for a moment. And she then takes a moment and opens the book up and sees in the picture of that book that he was looking at, there's a picture of a shark penetrating a boat and like some fishermen are in. And she immediately, Michael, did you hear your father? Get out of that boat now, now. And Brody, he like looks at her and he looks at Michael and he's like, what got into you? Because he's not even like paying attention. And it just, I don't know what it is. It might not be like other people might look at it and go like, whatever. But to me, it cracks me up every time. Such a mom, kind of moment, So that's one of my favorite funny moments. Yeah. Another one was, so this was after they had captured the tiger shark and Alex Kittner's mom had approached Brody and, pretty much blamed him for her son's death. And that was rough. So, when we catch up to them later, they've had dinner and he's depressed. He's really let that, get to him. And because, he does feel responsible, right? He knew what happened to Chrissy and he let himself be talked into keeping the beaches open and not, raising the red flag. And because of that, people went out into the water and we lost a little boy, a local boy, and a mother lost her son. So he feels absolutely racked with guilt. Well, then here comes Hooper showing up to dinner with a couple bottles of wine. He sits down and, Brody's just looking at him and Hooper goes, how was your day? Just makes me crack up. I love Richard Dreyfuss so much. Yeah. That just his humor, his laugh. I think I really love his sarcasm, and I love that moment. And another Hooper moment when they're on their boat and Quint is yelling at him as usual, to do this or that, and Hooper starts making faces at him. Yeah. Behind his back and, just being goofy and like flipping him off and making goofy faces. I just love that so much.
Yeah. Richard Dreyfuss in this movie was like the right kind of over the top. Like he was very animated. Like Hooper was just such an animated character doing all of these like crazy things and like just big bravado when he spoke, like to make, when he's being sarcastic at least, where he's putting so much emphasis in his words and just, but it doesn't come off as too much. It's like just the right amount of too much, like a little over the top. But it's fun.
Absolutely. Like when he's given the whole speech to the mayor, about having to shut the beaches down, and the mayor's just pissed off about, the shark fin being drawn on the billboard, and he's, trying to reason with the guy and explain to him why they're in a dangerous situation and what they have to do to, rein this in, or else it's going to be a complete disaster, for the 4th of July. And, just that, he's great. So I don't know. Did you guys have some funny moments of your own or funny lines?
Even when he arrived, he's asking the fishermen that are getting on the boat. He's asking them about a restaurant or a hotel, a local place. And they just said, walk straight ahead. And he just turns around and says, they're all going to die. Yeah. Or was something like that.
Just goes, they're all going to die.
Yeah. They're all going to die. And then he goes inside and tells, after he tries to help them, and they don't listen, goes inside and reports it to whoever was in the room and just said, there's some guys out there on that little boat. Yeah, they're not going to make it. They can't do this.
Man, that's one of the funniest moments of this movie, I guess. It's not just moment, but like the whole thing with all of these fishermen. I have a couple of notes on that because I was just like...
It's just absurd.
It is.
It's like they're all going after this reward, but it's like they all have these regular-ass fishing poles.
Dynamite.
And it's like, what are you hoping to accomplish with that? Yeah, there's this one guy that's got dynamite. At least some guys have like some harpoons and stuff. I was like, what a bunch of schmucks all out there on these boats at the same time. It's like one dingus is carrying a rifle out there. Like, that's going to do much. There's one that's just like pouring blood and chum into the water, but not marking it, not doing, just leaving a trail behind them as they go off further. It's like, what is the point of that? There's this guy with firecrackers, like just throwing them into the water, like that's going to do anything.
And there was that poor dog that was sitting like on the boat. I'm thinking, look, don't let anything happen to him with these idiots.
Right.
I know, like all these guys who are overloading the boat, you know, you can see just the hilarity in it. Like when they were talking about, hey, you guys are overloading that boat, and you see them all out in the water and how these boats are barely not having any water, you know, coming over because it's so overloaded. These small little, what'd you call them, Daphne, skiffs?
They're skiffs. They're little motorboats.
Yeah, I'm not marine, you know, knowledge.
Yeah, they are not meant for that. Yeah. And all I could think watching them go out is, you're basically in a boat that most people that I knew from where I grew up would row out to their bigger boat in.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
And then some of them managed to catch this tiger shark, and it just cracked me up for some reason. It's just a small little detail. They have this tiger shark hanging up, and there's a fucking arrow sticking in. Like I was like, one guy just decided to bring a bow and arrow and shoot an arrow at a shark as it's being reeled in or something. Like it's like these people. I just
what were they like? They're on a like hunting for deer on the water.
Right.
It's like it was just. And I would have loved to have seen had they actually encountered the shark and how big this dude was compared to those tiny little boats that they were on. Mm-hmm. You know,
they run across the one boat out there that did meet him, and didn't turn out good for that guy.
No, poor Ben Gardner. Yeah, R.I.P.
He met an unfortunate end.
He did.
And then even some of the like the deputies or whatever, like the other, you know, luckily the first shark encounter that they see as they're like monitoring the beach wasn't real. Ends up being these two kids trying to play a prank. But it's like you see it in the background like 2 or 3 times before they even notice it. And I was like, they're not even paying attention to the job they're supposed to be doing out there. So it's like, man.
Yeah, it definitely makes you wonder.
Mm-hmm.
They're supposed to have more people on the beach. They're supposed to have more people watching for this. They still don't see it.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy.
Just some dumb locals. And it's not necessarily like a funny part. We're kind of gone on a tangent on your point, but
we do on Run for Your Lives.
It's kind of a note, but yeah, just like these, like the mayor, because I even have it on here. It's just like, it's kind of become a recurring theme lately on Run for Your Lives, where we're talking about things are going bad or getting worse because of somebody just not listening to the experts or not listening to the people in charge and putting money over lives.
Man.
And
it's like real life.
That's become a little the recurring theme here.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I feel like lately the movies that we've been talking about, they're connected like that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was doing my notes for this one, I just found myself writing some of similar things down. It's like, wow, we've done a couple of movies that have that little thread that connects them.
Well, and I used, I think it was last year or the last time that we voted. I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look. But I used a meme from Jaws with the mayor just to express that without getting like too political. But, you know, I believe in voting, right? I believe everybody should go out and vote. And that's really important. Make your voice be heard. Mm-hmm. So I used a meme of the mayor from Jaws and said, you know, just to show the importance of voting, and said, you know, the mayor in Jaws 1 was also the mayor in Jaws 2. This just shows you how important it is, like, to go vote. That wasn't like exactly the verbiage on the meme, but that was the purpose of it. So, you know, that's, I think something that is spot on with this film, you know, is to show how people in power can be twisted, you know, by money and, you know, sacrificing the goodwill of their own people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's probably a delicate balance, but I think at some point you have to look at it and say, it's lovely to have money, but if you're not alive to spend it, I mean, really, what's the point?
Yeah, finally the mayor decides to sign off on sending Quint out there and paying him what he wants, which I guess we never saw the end of that. I guess he never got his money. I don't know what they ended up doing with that, but at least it took it getting more personal, where the mayor kind of had this little breakdown where he was just like, my kids were on that beach too. And when he realized, it wasn't until it got close to home with him that he realized the severity of the issue.
Yeah. And Brody just said, have you got a pen? You're going to sign this so I can hire a contractor. I'm going to hire Quint to go out and get this shark. Mm-hmm. And at first he's like, well, and he said, I'm going to do it. Yeah. And so he did sign off on it. And yeah, you'd have to wonder how he would get elected again.
How did he get reelected? Nobody. It's like nobody's out there at the polls, I guess, and nobody's out there pushing for it because, and maybe had he not made that decision, but it's kind of like what Brody was saying. He's like, you're the mayor of Shark City right now. This is the lesser of two evils. Let's shut down for this weekend or something so we can go out. Let's get people out of the water, close the beaches, go hunt the shark, take care of that problem so we can hopefully still salvage part of the summer. Because if not, more and more people are going to, because this is not going away. The shark is clearly like, hey, check out all the food I've got in the water out here. Why would he leave? So he can either, keep sacrificing more and more lives and people, getting hurt and killed, or he can close the beach down for the weekend, pony up some money and take care of it. Now he's, this is the lesser of two evils for him, sacrificing some, or else he's going to completely just sacrifice his reputation. And then if that happens, is anyone ever going to want to vacation there again? Maybe this summer isn't going to be awesome, but it could ruin every single summer for them as a reputation. Like, well, who the hell wants to go to that island when, people are getting eaten? Sharks.
Buffet.
So, yeah. I figure I'm going to find another place to vacation that year. I think I'm going to stay away from there. So
For sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Anybody else have any more of the kind of, I guess if we go back on topic of funny stuff, but even, more on that, but we think we're good. And then Daphne, I think it's time for your number 2, which you teased earlier and I've been waiting for. I'm ready.
I did. Okay. So my number 2 is Roy Scheider's Sheriff Brody.
Yes.
It's kind of, connected also to Amity Island and the economics versus safety and community. It's kind of all balled into one because I feel like Sheriff Brody was the voice of reason and had the community first, even though he hadn't lived there for such a long time. I thought it was really interesting that he does move to an island, but he doesn't like the water because that usually doesn't go hand in hand. But it did remind me that my dad, who was a lobster fisherman.
Awesome.
Yeah, he had a boat, he had a skiff, he, sold his lobsters. But my dad did not know how to swim.
Really?
At all. Yeah.
Interesting.
No. And at one point he actually disappeared. On his boat, he disappeared. And it was my grandfather who went out and actually found him. The boat had broken down. And I believe he was out of range, so he couldn't communicate. So my grandfather who was also a lobster fisherman, got in his boat and went out. Because my dad couldn't swim. And it's not uncommon.
Man.
It's more common than you would believe that lobstermen don't know how to swim.
That's interesting.
They have life jackets that they wear.
Yeah.
But, my dad could not swim. And having grown up in a fishing community that was also an island, my island experience was very different than this one. We didn't have a sheriff. We didn't have a mayor. We had town selectmen. It was just a very different experience. And we only had about 700 people that lived there. And it was connected by a bridge onto the mainland. So it was interesting for me, veering off just a little bit before I get back on a Sheriff Brody, was some of the community things that kept, going on that people were talking to Brody about. Like, the karate school kids are kicking in my picket fence. Or, there's a car with New Hampshire plates in front of my store. I need to get them to move. There was a garbage truck parked in front of an office, and one guy, I think this was the guy that was talking with Brody at the beach before Alex Kittner was attacked. He was talking to Brody about this garbage truck that was smelly, and he needed a red zone to put around it. And just wanting to catch the vandal that painted "Help Shark" and the big shark fin on the sign. Like, these are all, legitimate town
just
issues.
the little island town problems.
Right.
For sure. And watching this movie just reminded me, though, of my hometown and the people that lived there, just being a really close-knit community. And some of the dialogue was familiar. It's like, okay, yeah. And then Ellen Brody asking when she could be an islander, and the lady says, "You're not born here, you'll never be an islander." That is 100% something that goes on in Maine as a state. I've heard people saying, "Well, you're not from here, you're from away." And that's just, unless you're born here, it's just how it is. It's just one of those things. So for me, watching Brody encounter all of the people just coming to him and complaining, it was just like, oh boy, yeah. You've come away from New York to this place where things are a lot different in a small community. Yeah. It just runs very differently.
Very much.
Yeah. Although this one, they did have a mayor who I think was extremely incompetent. But, what do you expect from the mayor of Shark City, really?
Yep. Yeah.
All of these things are happening, and he's just like, amity means friendship. The beaches are open, and people are having a wonderful time. And it's like, you've programmed yourself to say that, but people are not having fun. There's a problem.
I'm so not having a good time right now.
Well, and it's really just, it's so reckless and irresponsible because it's like the locals kind of understand what's going on, but you have all of these people who are not on the island. They don't have a clue as to what's happening. And it's so irresponsible to open the island up to all these vacationers and these summer people, who have no clue that there's a shark out there that has decided to stake claim to the waters. And you're putting all of those people at risk. That's why I was saying it's like the lesser of two evils to shut down for that weekend, try to salvage the rest of the summer.
Yes.
But you have to take care of that problem. You can't just let all of these people, I mean, can you imagine how many lawsuits or just, and like I said, either the financial liability that comes with that, but then you also have like nobody, you're just now going to have that reputation that nobody's ever going to come there ever again. So deal with it now and try to salvage your reputation. And so we can at least have more summers to come, or else this is going to be a complete disaster and nobody's ever going to come here again. And we're all going to go bankrupt and not even have a town. So
yeah, I think too, it reminds me a little bit of what's been going on with COVID-19 and having to close down businesses.
Yeah.
That's going on here I don't know if I've ever said it on the podcast, but I live in Maine. So, I mean, it's going on everywhere where some businesses are having to close for a certain amount of time. And Maine being a huge vacation destination, that was a big issue. Trying to salvage some of that summer income when COVID is such a big deal. Well, in this situation, we had Bruce the shark that needed to be addressed. And to me, the mayor, I mean, he even goes down and talks to one of his friends and said, "Hey, you and your family go in the water. Why aren't you in the water?" And they reluctantly go in, and you can see they're just kind of walking in. And I'm thinking, that is not the best advice to be giving someone when you know there's a shark out there.
Yeah. Like, take your mask off and go walking around in this maskless crowd and potentially catch COVID.
Just do it.
Yeah. It
makes me look better.
It makes me look better. And the thing is, they were blaming Brody for the mistakes the mayor was making.
Yeah. Right.
And that kind of really pissed me off because he was trying to do the right thing. And, the mayor Vaughn was on the other side of it. And he was also, I noticed, a real estate agent. So I wondered if, he's trying to maybe sell some more property in the process. He thought it might affect his selling potential, or not really sure. The strange thing is that we're talking about this movie, and a couple of months ago, we actually had a shark attack off the coast of Maine. On, I think it was Bailey Island. Yeah. A woman from New York was here. And then there were other sightings after that. It was just kind of odd because it's just not something that, the waters here are cold, very cold. And so it was just something that I was really surprised. It's like the real life Jaws here, It's just kind of, it's kind of strange. The only other thing I had is Brody did have some really sweet moments when his son was mimicking him at the dinner table, and it was just so endearing.
Yeah.
And then he asked him to give him a kiss, and he says, "Why?" And Brody says, "'Cause I need it."
That moment hit me pretty hard because I could tell, Mrs. Kittner's words from earlier had really hit him pretty deeply, and he just needed some positive, like affection and reassurance from somebody close to him.
Like, somebody still loves me. Somebody still likes me. And
Yes.
yeah, I feel the same as you, Daphne. That should have been, her anger should have been directed to Mayor Vaughn. He's the one that should have been on the other receiving end of that hard slap, which was real, by the way. That was not just a play acted. She actually really smacked the shit out of Roy Scheider in that scene. He should have been on the receiving end of that, because he's the one that, was the one saying to keep the beaches open. And it was just Brody, reluctantly carrying out the orders that he's given because that's his boss. Yep. So.
Yeah. The actress that played Mrs. Kittner actually passed away not that long ago. She was like in her 90s,
R.I.P.
early 90s, I think. So, yeah. And a little bit more Jaws trivia. So yeah, that was my number 2 in my little story.
I love that.
Going off of trivia, then that's really my number 2. All is my number 2 doesn't really deal necessarily with scenes and stuff in the movie itself, but a lot of behind the scenes and production stuff is I call it just happy accidents. And there's a lot of stuff. Again, we talked about, there's a lot of creative ways that they kind of built up this monster shark to be scary and menacing without actually showing it, because they had a lot of mechanical issues with this thing. And I'm sure dealing with salt water and dealing with an open ocean and they just couldn't get the sharks to work correctly. And so a lot of the times it wasn't going to look right. So they resorted to using different tactics, like just the music, or a lot of it on the second half of this movie is just those yellow barrels bobbing up and down on the water, and they could move the barrels to where the shark was at, and using the barrels or the dock or different things to show where the shark would be without actually having to show the shark, which is very creative, and I love that. But there's a few other things that I thought were really cool, mainly like 3 other things I thought were really cool. First, of course, is the history of probably single most iconic line in this movie, which is Chief Brody's, "You're gonna need a bigger boat," which I thought was fun, which is very commonly misquoted as "we're gonna need a bigger boat," but it's he's talking to Quint. But I actually pulled some articles because I thought this was kind of cool. So this comes from Screen Rant, and they say Chief Brody's "You're gonna need a bigger boat" is one of Jaws' most iconic lines, which was a sly in-joke from the movie's troubled production. It suffered through an infamously messy production with issues such as filming on the water causing constant delays and mechanical shark not working. Screenwriter Carl Gottlieb was present for most of the movie's production and played the supporting part of Harry Meadows. In 2016, Gottlieb told The Hollywood Reporter that Roy Scheider, who played Brody, improvised that line because it was based on a joke that had spread through the crew during filming. It was based on the producers buying a barge to hold all of the production's lights and equipment, and that was supported by a boat that was far too small for the job. Despite this, the producers of Jaws decided they refused to pay for a bigger boat, despite the crew protesting about it. And so quickly, bigger boat became a joke on set whenever things would go wrong. So Roy Scheider worked the line into the scene with Quint, and the rest is just movie history. So it was really a joke at the production team constantly just saying, "Oh, we should have had a bigger boat" when anything would go wrong. And it fit perfectly into that scene, and Scheider just improvised it, and it became the single most iconic line in the movie, which is hilarious.
I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. It is. I've actually been at a trivia when that has come up. They'll ask you what the line is.
Yeah, and anybody who says we're going to need a bigger boat better get it wrong.
They get it wrong.
It's almost always wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
it is.
I think I got it right though when we had the Jaws round.
Yes, you did.
I did get that right.
Kind of like the Star Wars quote that everybody gets wrong, where they say, "Luke, I am your father." No, I am your father. There is no Luke there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Mm-hmm. I love that he improvised that line. I love that it was like an inside joke, to kind of riff on production that when something is going wrong and they say that, bigger boat is like the term that they use, and it seems it's just appropriate in that moment that they need a bigger boat, because something is very, very wrong. The shark is freaking massive.
Yeah.
It's like bigger than the boat. It's so absolutely true in that moment, and just absolutely iconic.
Another thing that I thought was cool is I had to pause it and look it up because I was like, what is the significance here? Is at the end of kind of like the third encounter they have with the shark while they're out on the water, where it's kind of, after they had their little sing-along moment and they were joking, and then the shark kind of attacks the boat, and it's at nighttime. And at the end of kind of that scene, you see these two shooting stars over the boat.
Yep.
And I was wondering what the significance of those shooting stars were, so I looked at it, and it's really interesting because there is no significance whatsoever, because those are not special effects added later into the movie. They are actual shooting stars that just happen to be concisely like caught on film at that exact moment. It was a happy accident. Like I say, it's like just a cool coincidence that they just happened to catch two shooting stars while filming these scenes, and they left them in the movie because they just thought it added a little extra something that was really cool.
That is cool.
That's awesome.
Yep, completely unplanned. They're just real astronomical events that happen that were
probably the little bit of luck they needed to get the movie finished amongst all the bad luck that they had with the movie. Maybe that was the little bit of good luck they needed to get them over that hump to get it finished.
Yeah. And the last one that I brought in here, which I thought was also really cool. No, it was kind of a long one. Again, I'm reading a lot from an article. But it was the real shark footage, actual footage of great whites that they used in this movie, and how filming those scenes actually saved the character of Hooper. And what that is here is originally Hooper was supposed to die in that shark cage. He was supposed to be brutally murdered in the cage by the shark. It was in the book that he dies in the cage. However, they ended up filming some real shark scenes because Spielberg wanted actual footage of great whites. And in the filming of those, they had to rewrite the scene. And this comes from Cinematography. It says, it's widely known that throughout the film, a robotic mechanical shark was used. However, in order to help legitimize the film a bit, Spielberg and his crew desired real sharks to be shot in the film as well. As a result, experienced shark photographers Ron and Valerie Taylor were hired to shoot some shark footage off the coast of Australia. The scene was to be shot with real sharks and involved the killer shark in the film attacking the cage that Richard Dreyfuss's Hooper was in. However, unsurprisingly, a problem soon presented itself. The sharks that were being filmed off of Australia were only 14 feet in length compared to the estimated 26-foot-long killer shark in the film. So to resolve the issue, the shark cage was scaled down in order to make the live-action sharks appear larger. And then they had to end up using a small dummy, or they end up using like a smaller person. I think some say that it was like a dwarf, like a little person. Others are saying it was just like a jockey who was like 4 feet. But either way, had a smaller person placed in the cage for some points. But then another problem arose that even when they attempted to bring the sharks in with bait, the sharks did not attack the cage. And a week went by as Ron and Valerie were unsuccessfully filming the attack scene. And then one day, a large shark swam over the top of this smaller cage and became entangled in the cables. Valerie Taylor quotes, and when a shark is trapped, it goes crazy. Ron was underwater filming, and actually that's how we got the footage that they use in the movie of the shark thrashing about on top of the cage. No one was in the cage at the time of filming this scene. And the footage was deemed so good that they ended up putting it in the final cut of the film. So they capture this incredible footage, but they realize nobody is in the cage. Spielberg, however, liked what was filmed, and not really having anything else better to work with, he put the footage in the final film. Due to no one being in the cage at the time of the attack, the script for Jaws was rewritten so that the character of Hooper originally would have died, would then live by hiding on the ocean floor.
All right. Whatever
it.
Saves Hooper.
Yeah,
I'm down
save
with that.
Hooper.
Save Hooper.
But I thought that was just
He was great.
crazy. It's all these little coincidences and crazy things that something was going wrong, and then they were able to spin it into gold.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It is amazing.
But yeah, that's really all I have for my number 2. I'm sure there's plenty of other little fun facts like that Jaws diehards out there probably know and could tell us and point out. But those were the main ones that I thought were most interesting to me.
Love it.
Awesome.
Cool. Rima, what do you have as your number one?
Gosh, it's so hard to just talk about like three things because and narrow it down. But one thing that always gets me, it got me the first time that I watched the film. It still gets me today after watching this film 100 times over since I was a kid. And that is Quint's USS Indianapolis speech. Pretty famous throughout cinematic, history. The fact that he delivers this very profound, sober speech. Now, he's not supposed to be sober in the film. They all look like they've, tied one on quite heavily, as they're all, joking and drinking, which I'm like, why are you drinking so heavy on it? You got a freaking shark out there ready to eat you alive. You should be sober. But they're a little heavy into their cups, and but it becomes a very sobering moment when, as you mentioned earlier, Daphne, they're trading their battle scars, right? Talking about their different wounds and what their permanent scars are, and Brody happens to notice Quint has a scar on his arm, and he immediately the moment and the air just kind of changes, and you just kind of recognize it immediately. They go from laughing and joking 1 minute, but as soon as he says that he was on the USS Indianapolis, it just becomes a very sobering moment. Hooper immediately, is like, whoa, you were there. And, Brody, I guess, doesn't quite know the history. But I familiarized myself whenever I was old enough to like look things up and understand, because even before I learned it in history class, what the significance of the USS Indianapolis was. And he delivers that speech so, intensely. Robert Shaw was such a brilliant actor. And, I know that there were some issues with him on this film. I'm sure just a few. But this one, just was so intense and so beautifully delivered that to me, it is just one of the most iconic scenes in film. And the speech, was not in the novel. But, it gives that backstory of when Quint was a sailor in the ship that first appeared. And, there were actual stories very similar to what he told. If you go looking up stories of survivors from the USS Indianapolis, they have very, very similar stories. So this isn't something that was just made up because this is a shark movie and it's about sharks. This was very telling. I was reading many stories from survivors that talked and said almost the exact same thing that Quint was talking about. So this was pulled from history, and, very, very relatable, to actually what happened. And I guess that because Robert Shaw, was, I guess, drunk for most of the shooting of the film, which kind of made him a little belligerent at times. And I know there was some difficulty working with him, and actors have their own history of, and their own stories of how he could be a little difficult because he was drinking a lot. I guess that when they originally filmed that scene, he was drinking and it was a mess. And I guess Steven Spielberg was pretty ticked off about it, and about his drunken behavior in general. So he said that he was very remorseful and said that he would come back the next day sober and do the scene again. And when he did, he nailed it in one take.
Awesome. That's cool.
Sober.
Wow.
So that just kind of shows, the talent that he really has, and, how gifted he was, as an actor, even though he, did have, I guess him and Richard Dreyfuss did butt heads, on set due to some behavior. I think there was a time where Shaw mentioned he wished he could stop drinking or something, and Dreyfuss grabbed his glass of booze and tossed it into the sea. But for this scene, even though they're acting like they're drunk, he was actually sober. He sobered up for this one and delivered it in one take. And I just thought, it's just brilliant for me. It captures me every time.
Yeah.
And it moves me and captures me. And he's so enigmatic in that moment. So just one of my favorite movie moments.
Awesome.
Well, I think you could tell, like, the air went out of the room.
Yeah.
As soon as they looked and were talking about the tattoo that he said he had removed.
Yep.
At least that's, I think, what he said.
Mm-hmm.
It's you're right. There's such a change of tone. And it really, to me, it's like the air went out of the room. We switched from this funny comedic moment to this just got serious. Here's a story. And it does affect you because it's so intense.
Yeah. And kind of paying honor to Quint a little bit because it kind of gives a little bit of backstory to like you were talking about Daphne. He's a crazy character. What makes him who he is, and this kind of tells you a little bit of, this is a part of him, and this is this event in history and what he went through has made him a part of who he is, and that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just kind of showing the respect to the character of what he's been through and what he survived and what he has seen, and just to kind of to pay honor to that. He was a vet, and honor and duty to his country and what he went through. And, I think that was, just kind of a moment that you just be quiet and respect, that moment and listen to his story.
Definitely.
So
definitely. Yeah.
Real powerful.
Well, he definitely nailed it.
He did.
In that take because it was pretty impactful.
He did.
Definitely. All right. Awesome. Daphne, what do you have for your number one?
Well, my number one we've actually already talked about a little bit. Actually, we've talked about it quite a bit. And that is Bruce.
Yeah.
The expensive, somewhat invisible threat. The way that they stretch it out. So it's like 1 hour and 2 minutes before we see the shark at all. And my parents actually went to see this in the drive-in.
Awesome.
And my mom had the book. So I got exposed to the book first. And I didn't realize that the first time that I watched the movie, that it was going to take so long for the shark to show up. But then it was like when it did, it was, that was it. The throttle was forward.
Sure
going
was.
Full throttle.
No holding back now.
Yeah. I felt like, too, like the movie switched. Like the first part was, here's your introduction. It's a little bit of an action thriller. It's a little bit of adventure. And then we got a sea adventure for the second half where they were out to sea. So the way it shifted, I thought they did a really good job with. But Bruce the Shark was, as we know, very expensive, and mechanical pieces did not always work, which also added to the fact that the movie took 3 times as long as it was supposed to take to finish. I loved one thing that's related to Bruce, but not directly him, is Hooper's humor throughout about the shark, because he was so smart. He knew everything that you needed to know. He knew within, 2 seconds of inspecting the body. It's like, this isn't a boating accident. This is a shark attack. And yeah, it was like they were oblivious. I also liked Quint did try to kill Bruce or hurt him with the knife or the machete when he was going down, when it was the end. And I just, I feel like we covered so much about what's great about this shark, and it's pretty awesome.
What you see and what you don't see of the shark.
Yeah, really. I mean, it was like a curtain. They pull a little bit back, but they would show you just enough, but not the shark.
Yep.
You saw the fountain of blood and the ripped up pool floaty. That's all I can think of when I see those.
Or they show a lot of really good suspenseful stuff, like from the viewpoint of the shark. A lot of, Rima touched on that at the very beginning.
Yeah.
A lot of those underwater shots looking up at people is where a lot of the most suspense comes from.
The legs in the water because everyone's swimming. It's like, oh boy, who's he gonna pick? It's like you're spinning a wheel. Who's going to be the lucky
That's why
one?
I cannot swim in the ocean. I don't go typically past my knees. And at that point, I won't go past my waist. My daughter got me out to my waist, and I was just like, yep, have fun. I'll be watching you from up here. You know, if you become an Alex Kittner out there, you know, out in the water, Mom, you'll be watching from here.
Ocean swimming is, I still do it sometimes, but it's
cold.
It's I've chased down a stingray with a GoPro before. That was fun.
We did swim with sharks. I braved it. We went snorkeling. So with snorkeling, you stay pretty much, I mean, you can hold your breath and dive if you want to, but you typically stay, you know, there at the surface. And there were some nurse sharks, you know, that we got to see. And that was definitely a surreal kind of moment, because as scared as what I am of them, I was determined to kind of like face that and like actually be in the water with them, and knowing that nurse sharks typically don't, not that I'll say 100% never, but they say typically don't come up too close to the top and like attack people. They're not known for that. They're not one of those species, you know, that are typically known for their attacks on humans. So, you know, it was, you know, I always try to conquer my fears a little bit, you know, so that was, you know, kind of a nice moment. But typically if I'm in the water, and this was in Florida, so the water was a little bit warmer, but, you know, typically I have a healthy respect for sharks. And as scared as I am of them, what I think one sad thing I think that kind of came of this is the hunting of sharks after this movie. You know, sharks have nearly become endangered. And as fearful as I am, like, I have a very healthy respect. Like, look, that is their home. That is their ground. They don't intentionally try, despite this movie intentionally going after people, they typically don't do that. And I know that. But I have a healthy respect knowing that there's a chance if I'm going in the water, there could be something out there that tries to eat me.
Oh, yeah.
So I respect that. But I also have a healthy respect for animals in general, and sharks included, even though I'm extremely scared of them and thinking they could eat me if I step into the water. I don't like seeing them hunted. Yeah. And, you know, I don't like that. So I like that they've kind of been more considered protected species over the last several years. So yeah, you know, I think that it's a good thing to try to just be respectful.
Yeah, it's
of the animal.
It's still scary to see different things in the water, because again, I think that same day, probably even, I know it was the same trip with the stingray thing I mentioned, was just like, you know, kind of snorkeling, you know, put on some goggles and stuff and just kind of go out a little further and just kind of keep diving and see what you can see. I remember one day I decided I was done with that, is after, you know, kind of diving under a breaking wave and looking, and just like probably not too far in front of me seeing this. It wasn't a shark, but it was a big fish with really sharp teeth, kind of shiny. Ooh. And I remember just seeing it swim by, and I was like, and I'm done. I'm going back now. That was good. That's enough.
Thank you. Thank you for that experience. I'm done for the day. I'm out of here.
All right, that's what's over here. I'm gonna go. I saw what I needed to see now. I'm done.
You know, the ocean is just this vast unknown. There's so much we don't know, and so much that's unexplored in the ocean. And, you know, there are sharks. At least one that we know is as big as the one depicted in this show. You know, Big Blue is out there somewhere. And anybody who's watched, you know, Shark Week and has a love of sharks in the last couple of years, that they've discovered Big Blue, who is, I thought they said about 20 to 25 feet, right? She's absolutely massive, and she's beautiful and gorgeous, and who knows how old she could possibly be. So, but yeah, fact is, sharks do get that big. It is a great white, and yeah, let's leave them there in their space. And
absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
Have their
All right, awesome. Anything else?
I am good. I feel like we have definitely covered Bruce. He has gotten the love today. So,
cool. Bruce.
Yeah, and my number one we've already covered pretty extensively, because my number one was Quint as well. We've talked a lot about that character and his backstory and all of that. I don't think I have anything else that we haven't talked about. So,
all right,
cool. Any other notes other kind of side notes and stuff anybody has. Rima?
Just checking through, we've talked a lot about, the shark not showing up for some time because of the mechanical issues, which, was, again, we've talked about how brilliant it was that Spielberg used the technique that he borrowed from Hitchcock of using the fear of the unknown or fear of what you can't see, because he wasn't able to use the shark. And I feel like that can be just as scary as what you do see when you don't know what that horror is. And so I, again, thought that was brilliant with the use of the music by the brilliant John Williams and by the barrels and other things that they used in place of the shark. To me, that was probably more scary than just about anything. However, the scene at the end when Bruce, and I'm just going to call him Bruce, I know it's not his name in the film, but he's Bruce to us, when he does that final leap into the boat, I mean, I lose it every time. I jump every time, I lose it every time, and I just, my unhealthy fear of water and boats. I mean, I'm totally Brody in this film. When Ellen's like, yeah, he's got this fear of, we live on this island and it's just a joke that, we live here and he has this fear and what's it called? And he's like drowning. And I'm like, yes, thank you. Yeah. I have that same healthy fear. I almost drowned as a kid. So I have an experience that, still to this day sticks with me. I'm
the same way. I don't mind swimming, but I had some close encounters when I was young. And so I have a, you could call it an irrational fear. I call it pretty rational because drowning is not fun. But that's the thing. So I don't mind swimming. Yes. I don't mind deep water. I like floating in deep water. But I don't like being underwater for very long. So even when we mentioned the kind of snorkeling and stuff, is I stay very surface and I'll go down for 5-10 seconds and then I have to be right back up. I can't stay underwater for long.
I'm totally the same. And, I had never, I grew up swimming in the river. That was a big thing that we did. I did grow up on boats, on boats. And that's when I had my experience. Whenever I was younger, I fell off of our boat and nearly drowned because I was just starting swimming lessons, ironically, because we were boating like every weekend in the summers. We had a boat. We always went out with friends every weekend. And I fell off of our boat and nearly drowned. And that has just always stuck with me. And I have, of course, since learned to swim, but it doesn't mean, it's really changed or, that fear at all. And swimming in the ocean and swimming in like calm lake water or ponds or rivers is very different than when you're in the ocean. And I wasn't used to that. And there was a day that we were out there and it was a little rough and I got kind of swept under just a little bit. And I wasn't able to kind of get up as quick as I wanted. And I just totally had a panic moment. I totally had like a PTSD moment of, back whenever I was younger and couldn't, get back up to the surface of the water. And very, very scary for me. So definitely related to Brody in this movie, and his whole fear of drowning. Let's see, what other notes did I have? Talked about just Robert Shaw in general. One interesting little thing that we talked about him being a volatile presence, he was also apparently running from the IRS during this time. So I guess he owed some taxes and he would flee from the US and go to Canada on the weekends to avoid facing a tax liability.
Wow. Well, I mentioned way earlier Jeff Voorhees that played Alex Kittner, that little interview I read with him, and Shaw kind of popped up quickly in that interview where he said that the whole cast and crew was really, really warm to him except for Shaw. He would go up to Roy, to Scheider, and oh yeah, you're cool. He would talk and different people. He said he walked up to Robert Shaw one day and immediately he just went, "Get away from me, you little kid! I don't want to talk." And just like he was very just didn't want to have anything to do with him.
Wow.
Oh man. Yeah, I've heard, just over the years, they always have something on TV or on cable about behind the scenes and the making of and things like that. And everyone has a story that they have, but they won't always tell, or they tell just a very brief, or they try to, make it as polite as possible. But it seems like everyone had quite the experience with Robert Shaw on there. So I think that's all the notes. I think we've talked a lot about that, but that moment though with Bruce coming up on the boat just impacted me tremendously. I mean, that to me is if I'm out on a boat in water, and it doesn't matter if I'm in an ocean or not, because we know sharks do go in fresh water. At least bull sharks are able to, and that's just all I can think of. Is just going to be this. That's all I can think of. It's like the entire time this is what's going to happen. It's just amazing the impact that this movie had in pop culture. I mean, people were really super fearful of going out into the water because of this film, and it's just, I just love it. It's a huge impact to society at the time, and I love it.
Cool. Any extra notes that you've got, Daphne?
Just my usual production notes.
Cool.
That's it.
All right. I'll go ahead and throw in a couple of little random ones real quick before we jump into that just little things that didn't really fit anything, but just little thoughts that I had. Of course, and we've all pointed out, but I put on here, I was like, we have to make sure that we recognize the iconic John Williams score and Jaws theme and the music. But then just some like little things. Let's see, when Chief Brody is typing a report on the dead girl at the beginning of the movie on Chrissy, I just happened to notice that he types out that she was moved to the coroner's office. Not with he left out the second O, not coroner, but coroner, CORNER.
Oh boy,
the coroner's office.
The coroner's office.
The coroner's office.
Yeah, just down to the coroner's office. Where is that? It's in the corner. Brody picks the red wine out of the two, the red and white that Hooper brings. I was like, good man. You know what you're doing. I'm a red wine myself. I'm a big Cab fan. Let's see. Other little notes. The actor who played Michael, I don't have his name on here. And again, didn't do much. But I said, I got to give props to this kid playing passed out with all that sand caked all over his body and face and his lips and his mouth and stuff. I was like, I got to give props to him because that is very uncomfortable. And
yes.
It was just one of those things I noticed. I was like, at watching that, my brain goes to the like behind the scenes stuff a lot. And I'm just thinking of the actual like child playing this role. I was like, man, he stuck with it because that was.
I mean, and we should be giving props to everyone in this film who went into that damn water because it was ice cold. They filmed during the summer. It was summer when they filmed, but like you said, Daphne, up there north,
it's cold.
The ocean,
the water is cold.
Yeah, and they said they talked about how ice cold it was. And if you watch the film, you can actually see lots of people, and like especially like the little kids who were faking the shark fin with the cardboard shark fin. They were like, you could see their teeth chatter and they were shivering. But if you watch, you can kind of catch a little bit of that here and there of how cold it was. So props to them because I don't know if you could pay me enough to get in that cold ass water.
Yeah.
The deeper that you walk out, the colder it gets.
Oof. No.
So whenever I go to the beach, this time of year, not so much, but whenever I'd go to the beach, I would walk on the beach, probably like August. I would always like wade out into the water, but not too far because it really does shock your system. When you step in it, it's that cold. Even on like a 95-degree day. Yeah. It's still cold.
I've been
it's
in
like
water.
A bone-chilling cold.
I've been in water that cold before. There's a place in Arkansas that, I don't remember what lake it was on, but it's kind of in the Hot Springs area. Big lake there. And there's an area that is next to a dam. But it has a way to where all the water from like the bottom kind of works its way up from, through the dam and kind of into this little area where we're swimming to where, it's middle of summer and stuff, but you get out and like the water feels like freezing. It's like ice water that you step into. And so when we'd be out in other parts of the lake and we'd be like, oh, it's getting really hot anyway, we'd roll over to that area and just jump in for a second. And it would really, it's like taking an ice bath. You would just kind of.
Yikes.
Yeah. So I've done that. Yeah, let's see a couple other little things. I said definitely a sign of the different times. When Brody and Mayor Vaughn are in the hospital and he's smoking in a hospital. And I was like, yeah, definitely sign of different times.
Yeah.
And then I just have a little, like, funny little quip, and I was like, Hooper has a real problem with dropping important things underwater. He needs to work on that.
Sure does.
Yes.
Better fingers
Yes.
underwater.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really all I had on that. So cool. So Daphne, you said you had some production notes.
All right. I do. We've talked about some of them already, so I'm not going to repeat them. There are a few that we did not talk about. Though Steven Spielberg kept the basic plot, he didn't use many of Benchley's book's subplots in the movie. One that they actually left out was an affair between Ellen Brody and Matt Hooper.
I'm okay with that being left out.
Yeah, not necessary.
Me too.
No, not necessary.
Yeah, for sure. Originally, producers wanted to train a great white shark. I'm like,
let's see that.
on
Let's see that. Let's see you try that.
Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. They did have 3 full-size prop sharks that were designed by Joe Alves, and the ones that they used for the side view required 14 operators. It was shooting at sea that caused a lot of the delays, as we talked about already, and there were sailboats and other ships that were drifting into the shots while they were filming, so they had to stop and wait, and so yeah, wasn't quite so simple. Peter Benchley, who wrote the novel, actually played a reporter in the film, and he wrote multiple scripts for the film, which they did use parts of. But comedy writer Carl Gottlieb, which Pake, I believe, talked about a little bit ago, who was known mostly for writing The Odd Couple, was brought in to add some humor and dimension to some of the characters. And there were additional writers that did not want to be credited, so they came in and polished dialogue and other aspects of the screenplay. Jaws had a really big impact on creature movies after that, including Orca, which was about a killer whale, even Alien, which actually was pitched as Jaws in space.
Sure was.
Joe Dante's Piranha, the original movie, and Spielberg actually said that that was one of his favorites, or the best of the Jaws, what he called the Jaws ripoffs. Alligator, Day of the Animals, and another movie called Grizzly.
How many of those are we going to end up covering on this podcast over eventual time?
Right. You kind of have to.
I know. And Orca is one that I really would love to cover because Richard Harris is in it, and it's not long after this movie, so it's really, it's good. It's kind of a guilty pleasure. Piranha, the original, is kind of hokey at times, but I think we could still cover it. And Alligator is another one of my little favorites from, I think it was around the 80s when it came out.
I remember that one. One of my faves, yeah.
And then Martha's Vineyard has held several Jaws festivals to celebrate various anniversaries of the film. And this last one I thought you guys might find particularly interesting. There will be a musical retelling of the behind-the-scenes of Story of Jaws titled Bruce. It is set to premiere in Millburn, New Jersey at Paper Mill Playhouse from June to July 2021.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's very, not just a Jaws musical, but a musical based on the behind-the-scenes making of Jaws.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes is nearly as interesting as the film itself. Yeah. I mean...
Yeah.
I'm in as long as there's a musical piece, as long as there's a number titled, you're going to need a bigger boat. Then I'm in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't see why they wouldn't. Yep. I'm going to have to go dig on this and see if I can find what some of the music is, because if they're going to use that line and make a song out of it, I might have to be into.
Yeah. Might have to travel to see that one.
All right.
Yeah. I feel like if we can be traveling at that time.
If we can be traveling, let's see what's to come in 2021.
Yeah. Let's hope for better. So, yeah, that's the end of my notes on that.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right. Then I guess let's move in a little bit to quotes. Everybody's got some fun quotes and stuff that they had pulled from the movie. Rima, did you have anything?
I think a lot of them you have listed here already. So let's just, I'll just share those, with you guys if you want to read those off, because I can't improve on what you have.
Okay, well, Matt Hooper was having a heated discussion with Mayor Vaughn and arguing, and he basically just said, I'm not going to waste my time arguing with a man who's lining up to be a hot lunch. I thought that was quite funny.
I love it. Love Hooper.
And then the other one that resonated with me, mostly because, growing up on an island and being born in Maine, there was a discussion between Brody and Mayor Vaughn. It's an ongoing theme. And Mayor Vaughn says, we're really a little anxious that you're rushing into something serious here. It's your first summer, And then Brody says, what does that mean? Followed by Mayor Vaughn saying, I'm only trying to say that Amity is a summer town. We need summer dollars. If people can't swim here, they'll be glad to swim in the beaches of Cape Cod, the Hamptons, Long Island. And Brody says, that doesn't mean we have to serve them up as a smorgasbord. And then Harry Meadows responds with, we've never had that kind of trouble in these waters. And I'm just like...
Until you do.
I can't even. Chrissy died, for heaven's sakes.
But we haven't had that kind of...
Yeah, and the last one we've talked about already, it was basically Quint's little monologue when he ran his fingers down the chalkboard. So I don't think we need to rehash that. So, Pake, what do you have on your quotes list?
All right. Mine, I had Hooper's, what we mentioned, as far as his little, they're all going to die. I liked that one. So I had that. I typically like the funnier ones, but one that really stuck with me was after Mrs. Kittner had her discussion with Brody and slaps him and puts this blame on him. And Brody goes back to Mayor Vaughn, and Mayor Vaughn says, I'm sorry, Martin, she's wrong. To where Brody says, no, she's not. Which is pretty poignant, but also, it hurts a little bit to see, because I'm like, but she's not wrong, but it's not all your fault. He puts that blame on himself, too, where Mayor definitely should carry most of that weight, too.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think Brody knows he should have stood up and pushed more, maybe, and pushed a little harder, because I think that he was a little bit intimidated, because as the mayor, like you said in your quote there, Daphne, it's your first summer here. You don't understand. You don't, and of course, Brody doesn't want to be he's like, well, yeah, I don't want to bankrupt the town because we've closed the beaches. And, I think he feels he should have pushed a little bit harder. So he does put that on himself, even though the responsibility does not lie solely with him. He definitely probably feels he should have pushed a little harder, but due to his lack of experience and seniority on the island, not being an islander, not being a local, he kind of caves to the pressure. So that's it's a shame, because then more people lost their lives. But
well, I also feel like the mayor would have overruled him anyway.
Yeah, he was very set. They had a whole crew of people that were ready to be well, you can't do this all on your own. You can't make that call because of subsection blah, 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 blah. It's all...
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. Brody has another line that I think is pretty iconic. Not anywhere near as iconic as the boat line, but I love where he says, I can do anything. I'm the chief of police.
I love that line when they're at the dinner table. He's half lit already, and he pours when he opens that red wine. He pours in this huge tall glass. So he's got this huge tall glass, and he's just downing a big chug of it, and then delivers that line. And I love that, because there was a really great line that paid homage to that in Stranger Things. Hopper says that same line.
I can do anything. I'm the chief of police.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, and I knew it immediately when he said it. I was like, oh, he got it from Brody from Jaws. And when I looked it up, that was an actual fact. They said, yes, that was a little tribute to that film.
Love it.
So yeah, absolutely love it.
It's such a mic drop moment.
Yeah.
It's end of story, end of discussion.
Yeah, which of course, they should have taken care of that anyway. Because again, tangent off of the quotes for a second, but the thing with Mayor Vaughn is he says that, we need to autopsy the shark, and you cut it open and make sure that we got the right one. And the mayor's just like, well, I don't want to do that right here because what if like the remains of this kid like spill out on the dock in front of everybody? And it's like, well, yeah, duh, that's a good point. It's like, but as you see here, it's like you easily could have just taken it to a different private area to do it. But why would they just not do it the first time?
Yeah, just to be sure.
Yeah, I can almost hear him saying that. We don't want to see the little Kittner boy spill out here on the dock.
Spill out all over the dock.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can hear that.
And then the last one I have on here for quote is a little between Hooper and Brody after they do actually do the autopsy. And then they realize, like, yep, the shark we're after is still out there. And Hooper takes off and says, I'm going to find him right now. He's a night feeder. Brody says, on the water? Hooper says, if we're looking for a shark, we aren't going to find him on the land.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that one. It was just so funny.
I'm not getting out on a boat. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
No, I won't. Yes,
little,
little
back and forth, that little argument. And Hooper's like, yeah, you can do this.
I don't think Brody wanted to be on a boat, but I think he knew he had to go on the boat.
Yeah. It's funny to see him in that life jacket on this big boat when they were out on the Aurora. I mean, this was definitely the more proper type of boat they probably should have had out there, hunting down the shark. It seemed to be, in a more appropriate sized boat and well equipped. And it was a very, scary if you're scared of water, scared of boats, a good boat to be on. But here's, Brody with this like almost too small of life jacket because he's so fearful. Good moment.
I'm surprised he didn't wrap himself in life jackets. Just to be prepared.
Have like one of those donut life preservers around him or something too.
Have like the arm floaties that you put on like a 6-year-old.
Yeah, the floaties.
Yeah. Good old Brody. You gotta love him.
It's great. All right. So is that it? Any other quotes? You say, Rima, you have anything?
I said mine earlier with the funny lines. Those were kind of some of my favorites that stand out. And of course, we've covered the iconic, you're going to need a bigger boat. So yeah.
It's a good one. All right. Daphne, what do you have for sequels?
Just, there were a few sequels that came off this movie. Just a couple. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, they did a gradual decline as far as how good they were.
Mm-hmm. I'll be honest, I haven't seen any of them.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, homework.
That's homework.
Yeah, no, that's my... But I'm looking, and I'm... Spoilers ahead, but you did say they kind of decline. I'm looking at what you have here on the document for, the quick little, like, rundowns of these. And some of them, I'm like, you know what? I think I could go without seeing pretty much... Maybe the second one seems interesting. And I'm like, but after that, I'm like, those probably should have just not been made.
But if you don't appreciate Jaws, the original, enough, you should watch the sequels and you'll realize what a great masterpiece of filmmaking that it is after watching the sequels.
Yes, especially the third one that was made as a 3D. You know what part I'm going to go to, Rima.
I do. I know exactly the one.
It's just not good. Not good at all.
Look, the only reason that I watched Jaws 3 was because as a kid in the 80s, I had a huge crush on Dennis Quaid.
As did everyone.
So, and I still do, of course, but I had a huge crush on Dennis Quaid. And so that is, why, of course, I had to watch this movie, even though I knew it was probably terrible. I got to watch it because Dennis Quaid's in it.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, Jaws 2 was released a few years after the first one. It cost about $30 million, so they had a bigger budget and grossed about $208 million. And the premise is Brody suspects another great white shark is terrorizing the Amity Island community. And as we've talked about, the mayor is still there.
Yeah.
But Brody does return in this one, and as does his family. In Jaws 3, or Jaws 3D, that was released on July 22nd, 1983. Budget of $18 million. It grossed only about $88 million. Mike Brody, played by Dennis Quaid, is working at an aquatic park in Florida where a young great white shark gets in the park's underwater tunnels. Once captured, the larger shark is the larger shark is discovered to have been behind the attacks. So, infiltrating those systems, causing all manners of havoc.
Oh, man.
Yeah. It wasn't great, but like I said, Dennis Quaid.
Had to check it out for that.
Yeah.
And Jaws the Revenge, which I kind of consider the movie that really should never have even been on the docket, ever.
Yeah.
Was released on July 17th, 1987. It was made for about $23 million, grossed about $51.9 million. And the premise is this. After the death of her husband and youngest son, Ellen Brody goes to visit her son Michael and his family in the Bahamas, where he is a marine biologist. And the shark, who killed her son Sean, follows her there. I mean, what could be better?
Oh, man.
The original Jaws.
Once you turn it to like a plot where like sharks are like stalking people and knowing where they're going, it's like,
Yeah.
You've lost the story at some point before you got here.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure, and I'm really embarrassed that I cannot remember her. Lorraine Gary?
Yes, Lorraine Gary.
Who played Ellen Brody? Yes, thank you. It just came to me at the last minute there. I thought for a second I couldn't remember, and there she was. I'm pretty sure that she admitted that she made Jaws the Revenge for the paycheck. Like, they offered me a pretty decent paycheck. So it wasn't necessarily like they presented me with this brilliant script that I just had to be a part of. It was, you know what? They offered me a pretty good paycheck. And you know what? Look, I don't fault anybody for that. I mean, everybody's got to earn a living and, you do what you do. So I don't fault her for that. But yeah, it was, not the best. And I've seen them all. And I agree with what you said, Daphne. If you're going to watch any of the sequels, Jaws 2 is the better of them. It's not, I mean, Jaws is always my favorite, but if you're going to watch the sequels, the second one, does hold up a little bit better than I think the other ones, but there's definitely nothing like the original. It's just a shame, but that was the way of things, right? In the middle 70s there and in the 80s was, this movie was super popular, made a huge impact on audiences. It made a ton of money. I mean, because Star Wars wasn't out yet. So this movie was the highest grossing movie of its time until Star Wars came out.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it was huge. So of course, what do in America? We make a sequel. we squeeze every dollar that we can out of it with all the sequels and just burn you out on it. So that was the way of things. And Jaws was not any better in that aspect where they decided to keep running with it. So it's just unfortunate that the quality, that it happens.
Yeah. I think that once they left Amity Island, for me, that was the big thing.
Yeah.
I liked it being set on it. I related to Amity Island because living in Maine on an island, it was, I related to it.
Absolutely.
All right, we get to the fun part here of ranking our beloved movies.
Yes.
How do we do it? This is a part where we might end up having to fight each other. Who knows?
I don't know. I have a feeling we might.
I'm scared to rank Jaws in front of Rima.
Oh, dear.
No. Just we'll get there.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we'll let Rima start, though, since she is our guest here.
Yes.
She's going to set the bar for us.
Yeah.
I mean, if 10 is as high as I can go, it's a 10 for me. I mean, I might pull a Spinal Tap and go up to 11 on this one. So, I mean, like I said, this is truly my top movie of all time. I never get tired of watching this movie. Since I was a kid, and it's that movie. And there's more. There's a ton of movies that when you see them on, you have to just like, okay, that's it. Nothing else is happening today. This movie, I'm going to turn it on, and this is what I'm watching until
exactly.
It's done. So Jaws is Jaws is that movie for me. It doesn't matter if I catch it in the beginning, middle, or end. I have to flip it on, and we have to watch it. Or there's just times where like, you know what? I've only seen Jaws a couple times this year. I think it's time to watch it again. So then I'll go turn it on. I did get to see it at the drive-in this year, with the pandemic and the movie theater shut down. at least you could go to drive-ins, and we do have a really awesome local drive-in, and they were showing a lot of the older movies, and they put Jaws up this year. And I told my daughter, she's always trying to drag me to the movie, to the drive-in. And I'm always kind of like, oh, well, it depends on what's playing. But as soon as I saw them put Jaws up, I was like, guess what we're doing this weekend? And it was like a huge moment for me because I didn't get to see it as a kid at the drive-in. I, had to watch it in the movies and then, seeing it on TV at home. So getting to see Bruce on the big screen, just meant a lot to me. And so this movie is definitely just my top. It's my number one for sure of all time. And
awesome.
It's definitely an 11 for me. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to cheat.
She's breaking the ceiling.
You totally can. You can. All right, Daphne, where did you land on it? I'm going to make you go before me. That's how this goes.
You always do. So, I am going to go in at a 9.25. I love it. It's in the same vein for me as my beloved Jurassic Park. So I couldn't really make it any higher than my JP. Just saying.
I respect that.
Yeah. I love it though. I do. Yeah. I think there's so much to love about it. So I can give it at least in there with my JP.
I respect that. Big Jurassic Park fan here too, so I respect that. Totally.
I'm gonna have to shuffle things around. Okay. Because what I said, and I say this has become a thing where it's like, whose line is anyway? So the scores are made up and the rankings don't matter.
The points don't matter. Yep.
Yeah. Because the bar moves so much because, Jurassic Park was one of the first episodes we did. And so I only gave it a 9, I think. And then I've had other movies like The Ritual and A Quiet Place also land on 9, even though Jurassic Park holds this like much more legendary, iconic spot. So I think, here's what I'm going to do. My initial Jaws was 8.7. However, I think I'm going to have to take it up to a 9, maybe even like a 9.1. And then I'm going to have to take Jurassic Park and bump it up to like a 9.3, 9.4. Somewhere in that. Like, I think I'm going to have to like move some shit, like shift some stuff around.
I'm going to have to go back and look at all of our rankings and just see how messed up they are.
I know. Like, we're going to have to figure out how to like fix this problem. But, so initial 8.7, but I think it deserves higher, but I've just got to figure out how that falls in line. Because I'm with Daphne. I'm like, Jurassic Park holds a more special place in my heart personally. So we'll have to play with rankings a little bit.
Yeah,
I get that. They're both made by the master, though.
They are. That is the common thread.
So I think the cheap, easy way out is say, I give it a high ranking, and it's good.
I mean, Jurassic Park is phenomenal, and I love that that's like one of your favorites, too, because, that was a huge impact on me, too. I'm a huge dinosaur nerd, and my daughter is, too, and definitely... I mean, Steven Spielberg, the man can produce this movie magic and he can produce these feelings and the same, it's not the same exact feelings. They're different feelings, but the level of feelings that he emotes from Jaws. And then when I turn on Jurassic Park, and it's the same for my daughter too, and we'll watch it, and it's just that same exact feeling. And I'm like, I worship at the altar of Steven Spielberg for sure, for being able to draw out those feelings in me, by what he can do. And it's amazing. And so I totally respect that. Look, Jaws isn't for everyone, and it's my favorite, but it's not everyone's favorite. And I respect that, but you guys love it. And that's okay with me. It's still, we're still cool.
Yeah.
One of the running things that we've talked about is that the movies that we've been watching have been old favorites or new favorites or higher ranked movies. And in the future, we do have one in particular that's coming in that we're going to be taking a look at that may not live up to a 9 or a 8 or a 7.
But that's the purpose, I think, is it's supposed to be bad.
That's okay. You got to get some underdogs in there somewhere,
I think this is way under.
Okay. We keep doing these rankings because it's fun to talk about, but it's hard because even though we're, in a, like, genre, sort of, but we're doing, like, monster movies, but, like, we're doing, like, these creature features, but, you have these, like, Spielberg epics, and you have disaster movies like, we've done Dante's Peak and Twister and things like that, and it's it's hard to compare these movies that fall under such different genres and different styles.
Yeah, for
on
sure.
a ranking scale.
Yeah. We're learning that, we're about 10 episodes
I don't know how
in.
I don't know how you guys do it. I don't think I could do that. I'm always terrible at that. Going on and guesting with Jason on Walking Dead cast, and he'll ask you, how do you rank it, from like on a scale of 1 to 5, and I'm just always like, oh shit, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's tough for me. So yeah, that's something I try to stay away from. It's tough for me because but it's definitely just based on how the movie makes me feel. It's very nostalgic for me. It holds a special place in my heart, and it's how it makes me feel. That's why it gets so much. But
absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's the first 10 that any movie has received on Run for Your Lives.
Because I love it that much.
It counts. We'll take it.
It's just perfection in my eyes. There's nothing wrong that I can find with it at all. To me, it's just perfect. Everything's cinematography, the music, the action, the dialogue, just everything from A to Z in that movie to me is just absolute perfection. And I realize that that's me. Not everyone feels that way. You can be wrong if you want, but that's I'm teasing. but for me, that's just where I land with it.
Awesome. Well, I think that kind of wraps up everything. Did we give you enough time to get all of your Jaws love out? Or do you need another hour?
I could easily just sit here and chit chat with you guys just like nonchalantly and like we weren't recording and just have a conversation about it, or, and I could go on and on and on, but all good things must come to an end. So again, I love this because, like I said, nobody in my real life wants to talk to me about this movie. No one loves it in my real life, as much as I do. So knowing that you guys, love it the same, and give me an outlet to talk about it was just like the biggest treat in the world. So this was just a great moment for me to be able to like somehow get this out of my system just a little bit. So.
Awesome. I love that. And I'm super honored, and I'm sure I won't speak for Daphne, but I'm sure I probably do. But so it's like, I'm really honored to have you on here.
Yeah, we both are.
For you to come on and nerd out about Jaws and take some time out of your week to come and hang with us and talk and really break it down. It's a super sized, jam-packed, long episode of Run for Your Lives, and I think it's worth every second of it. No, it's so
sorry.
So
good. No. I get so passionate about something and I'll just go on and on. So if you give me the platform, I'm going to talk about it. So I apologize in advance, but it really was just a super treat for me. And I'm super honored that you guys asked me. Then that when you decided to cover this movie, that you thought of me
immediately.
That to me is like an honor. Like, you thought of Jaws and thought of me. Yeah. That means everything to me. So thank you so much.
When we first started, first of all, one of the reasons why I wanted to do Run for Your Lives is because I don't have a lot of friends who will nerd out with me about these types of movies. They just mean a lot to me. I enjoy them so much. Mm-hmm. And when Pake and I started talking about, we should have guests. And, Rima's going to come on and do Jaws with us. That was not a question. It was the same.
Let's see what she says. It's like, no, it's going to happen.
It's going
she doesn't
to happen.
Really have a choice.
Yeah, there was no question. Both of us, I think, at the same time said, Rima's got to do Jaws with us. Like, there was no question.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That really means a lot. That makes me a little emotional. Aww. So thank you so much for thinking of me like that. And it truly is an honor that you thought of me and asked me to come on, to your podcast. I have a podcast too. So, I know what that's like. And so being on this end of it is still very humble. Very humbling.
Well,
so thank you both so much for having me.
I think I can speak for Pake when I say we really appreciate you taking the time, like he said, to come on and nerd out with us about this, because I think it's a better conversation when you have it with someone who really cares about the movie as much as we do,
yeah, for
or
sure.
even more than we do. So I think that it
For
just
sure.
brings, we're giving it some love. And I think that a movie like this that's so iconic deserves as long as it takes to nerd out and have fun with.
Absolutely. I love that you're giving all of these cool movies, their due time and their respect. And listen, anytime that you want to chat offline, it doesn't have to be a formal podcast experience. You want to nerd out about something, because like I said, I don't have a lot of people in my daughter just like rolls her eyes at me anytime, so I'm like, I gotta talk about this. I need someone to nerd out about it and really dissect it and talk about it. So hit me up.
For
You're like,
sure.
Let's talk about this. Let's talk about it. I'm always, when we don't even have to record it, we can just have like a fun conversation. I'm always down for that.
That is great to hear, because I love a good nerd out. Sometimes you just need to like talk about something that you're excited about, and movies take you to a place. The music and the cinematography and the acting, it all takes you to a place, and sometimes you need that in your life. I think especially how things have been lately, movies have just been a huge part of just making you feel good. Even if it's a scary one, I just feel like it takes you to a place that you want to be at.
Yeah. Well, it's a great way to escape.
Yeah.